We will now reconvene the special city council meeting. Ms. City Attorney, do we have any closed section action to report?
Item number 1 on the closed session agenda, the city council gave direction to the city's legal counsel to settle the matter for $50,000. Once the settlement is fully executed, it will be on file with the city clerk's office. And item number 2, the city council gave direction to its labor negotiators, but took no formal action. That ends closed session report.
Thank you. The special city council meeting is now adjourned. Before I begin the regular city council meeting, Community Development Commission, Housing Successor Agency meetings, I would like to inform members of the public that I will be taking public comment for non-agenda items on the agenda via our teleconference line. Those wishing to address the city council may call 562-299-6622 when I make that announcement. Persons speaking are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Your comments will be recorded and you will be advised when your time has ended. Once your time has ended, the call will be immediately disconnected. For those who have submitted their comments via email, your comments will be read into the record at the appropriate times during the meeting, and no additional public comment will be permitted via teleconference. I would like to call to order the regular City Council and Community Development Commission Housing Successor Agency meetings. City Clerk Duarte, will you please take roll?
Yes, Mayor. Before I take the roll, I would like to inform members of the audience that Councilmember Ashton and Councilmember Saab are participating via teleconference. Councilmember Commissioner Ashton?
Present.
Councilmember Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Commissioner Saab?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vice Chair Frometa?
Present.
And Mayor Chair Pacheco.
Present. We will now have Councilmember Rick Rodriguez do the invocation for us.
Would you please join me and rise? Thank you, Lord, for this time we can come together here in this place, Lord, in our city, Lord, as we prepare to do the business of our city. We pray for guidance, and we pray that you guard our hearts, Lord, to do the right thing. Lord, we pray for our police and our fire and our public safety brothers and sisters around the country during this time, Lord. And Lord, we also pray for every different department within our city. Will you guide them and guard them, Lord, and protect them as they do their service unto our city. So join us now in this place, Lord, this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. I will now have Mayor Pro Tem Claudia Frometa lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Be my honor. We can please put our hand over our heart. Let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It is now time for City Council Member Commissioner announcements, requests for future agenda items, conference meeting reports. And I'll start off to my far left with Mayor Pro Tem Claudia Frometa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It is very nice to see some members of our community in our audience tonight. Thank you for being here. And it is a pleasure to be here once again conducting the people's business. And first, I want to acknowledge our police chief and our fire chief. And I want to thank you for the work that was done over the last several weeks, but particularly the last several days as we increased our efforts in our city, in our community. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for continuing to keep our residents and our community safe. I had the opportunity over the last several days, I think I mentioned some weeks back, that the Downey High School robotics team put together these face shields, about 2,000 of these at the height of the COVID crisis. And they made these available to our hospitals in other places that were running short of personal protective equipment. And I had the opportunity to go to the district office, to the Downey Foundation for Educational Opportunities, and pick up about 250 of these face shields. And over the last few days, as some of our businesses, particularly dental offices and orthodontic places, began to reopen, I was able to visit with them and give them some of these face shields, and they were very appreciative of that. And again, I think during these unprecedented times that we've all faced in our world, in our country, and certainly in our community, it is really nice to see that with some guidelines, and we can see it here in this chamber with the facial coverings and the social distancing, but it was really good to visit with some of these businesses and be able to give them the protective equipment that our students made, and they were very, very appreciative of that. I also had the opportunity to visit some of the restaurants in Downey that have reopened for in-dining. And again, over the last several weeks, we've continued to indicate and encourage members of our community to support our local economy, our local businesses. Certainly, we've all felt the difficulty that COVID-19 brought to all of us. But it was really nice the last weekend to visit 3 different restaurants and meet with some of the managers and really be back to some sense of normalcy. The late President Ronald Reagan once said, "Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means." And as I reflect on the events that have transpired in our country and certainly even in our community over the last several days, I have to say I am very proud of the community we have. We have a community that has over 200 neighborhood watch groups. We have a city that has over, I want to say 60 plus churches, and definitely close to 90 service groups and organizations. So Downey is a special place, and while we faced some uncertainty with this novel virus and we had to pivot in many ways, I have to tell you that the way we saw our law enforcement and certainly our community and our community residents respond to events that were happening around us was very comforting, because again, peace is not the absence of conflict. And this community is not a perfect community, but it is how we go about handling conflict and handling the differences and the challenges that come our way that elevate our resolve and that continue to make Downey the special place that it is. And so I have to tell you that I am very proud to be part of this community, and certainly proud to sit here and meet with our residents. There will be always differences of opinion, and there will always be differences of thought and differences of belief, but knowing how much we care about our city and how much we care about each other and how much we care about our first responders, and in return, how much our first responders care about us, is what makes Downey such a special place to be. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any other further comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councilmember Rick Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have too much to say other than I want to recognize my good friend Michael Calvert in the audience from our Downey Chamber of Commerce. That is you, Michael, right? I can't tell with the mask. That is you. Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for being here. And then, and I'm very happy. Michael and I have talked during this pandemic time about how we can get our business community back into doing business. And so I'm very thankful that our city has such a great Chamber of Commerce that we're looking to do good things to get them back in business. And that's it for me, Madam Mayor. I'm just glad to be sitting back in this council seat. I've missed a few meetings, so due to health situation, but I'm glad I have the seat back. So nice and warm, ready to go to work. So let's do this.
Thank you, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Councilmember Sean Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I only have one item for staff. I have been noticing a lot of fireworks stuff going off over the past couple of weeks, and I wanted to, make sure that we are doing what we can to address those issues. But on top of that, I've had a lot more of like neighborhood disturbances with things, and looking at our code, it says like to keep peace time is like from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I don't know, maybe we should look at that and see if there's a way we can adjust those times. I mean, I don't know, like I don't mind some of the music, but at certain times it's kind of loud when really shouldn't be for me when it's like a block over. So I don't know if we can have a city staff and the attorney look into updating our neighborhood noise ordinances to deal with those types of issues. Maybe look at the what times people can be a little bit louder than other times, I guess. So that's really all that I have. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to our council meeting today.
What about Councilmember Saab?
Oh,
Madam
I
Mayor?
am so sorry. I'm used to ending with you. I'm so sorry. I apologize profusely, Councilmember Alex Saab.
It's okay, Madam Mayor. No big deal. I'll keep my comments short. Everyone, I think, said, what should have been said, and I appreciate it. Just real quick, I also want to just give a, quick shout out to our Public Works Department. I know that, we know that the police did a great job in the last couple of weeks, given the circumstances. But our Public Works is out there also, working hard and preparing and so there's sometimes the unsung heroes of our community, and there's quite a bit of them, and we couldn't do it without them. So I just wanted to recognize them and highlight their efforts. That's it. That concludes my comments, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to just welcome everyone to our city council meeting. Last week was our first week that we reopened to the public here at City Hall, and little by little we are seeing more reopenings within our city. Our restaurants were able to open at 60% capacity. Our retail stores are now able to open. Hair salons and barbershops are open, and also places of worship are open at 25% capacity or 100, whichever is less. But little by little, we are seeing more and more reopenings, but we still are dealing with COVID. And so it is still recommended that everyone wear their facial coverings, which is nice to see that everybody is wearing theirs. And also social distancing is very important, which I see that everybody here is practicing that. So it is a new normal that we are in, and hopefully sometime in the future, we will be able to return to even more normalcy. But it's always nice to have people in our council chambers. And little by little, we will get there, but we have to take precautions. And as many of you are aware, last week was a troubling and difficult week within our country, within our state, within our communities. It was horrific what happened to George Floyd, and there was a lot of protesting. Unfortunately, a lot of that protesting at the beginning led to a lot of destruction within communities, a lot of looting, vandalism, and it was really tough to see communities where buildings were set on fire and all the looting that was done to business owners who were now able to open, but unfortunately had to close because of everything that was happening. And in Downey, last week we had 2 protests. I know we were a little uneasy. I was very uneasy, but everything was peaceful, and we didn't have any looting within our city, any major incidents, I should say, within our city. So I just commend the peaceful protesters for being peaceful and expressing the First Amendment rights, which is important for us all to express, but also to our Downey police officers who did such an amazing job. They work many hours last week. And so I just want to say a big thank you to our police chief and to our officers who worked tirelessly last week and kept our community safe. So thank you very much. This is a reason why we are blessed in Downey. We have our own police department. We also have our own fire department and our own school district. And it makes us a special community. And I also wanted to mention that in Downey, we have a lot of service groups. This morning, I attended the Gangs Out of Downey Zoom meeting. It's an organization helping students keep them out of gangs and keeping gangs out of our city. And this is just one of many service groups that makes an impact and helps students. In fact, in Downey, we have 2 Kiwanis clubs, which is a service group committed to helping children in the world. And I think that's really what makes a difference, having the community come together, having our police department do coffee with cops, engagement with the community. It's all about helping each other, helping the community. And I just have to say that it's a pleasure being a resident here in Downey. It's a pleasure growing up in this great city. So I'm just really proud of our residents, staff, to our city manager. I know last week, again, was a tough week, but we made it through it. All of us, we all made it through it. So thank you, everyone. And that concludes my comments. So we will now proceed to presentations. The first presentation that we will have is the City Council presentation from Gateway Cities Council of Governments regarding the update on the I-710 South Corridor. Do we have somebody providing that presentation on the
Yes, Mayor,
line?
we have Joel Arevalos from Gateway Cities that will be presenting tonight. Joel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Actually, the public, that's Karen Height, public iPad number 4.
Okay. And so I'll run the slides for you. If you can just let me know when to switch to the next slide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, it's nice to be here. I'd rather be there in person, but what I want to do today is just quickly advise you that there is going to be a public meeting for the I-710. We had planned to do it in Paramount, but obviously the world changed from the time we were planning it to now. So first slide, please. Just as a reminder, this is the purpose and need for the project. The project has been going on for quite a few years. The purpose and need is still valid. There are still issues with air quality, although not recently, public safety, and the fact that the freeway was built in '54 and the world has changed tremendously, particularly in the sense that the 20-foot container truck of the '60s didn't even exist when the freeway was designed. Safety is a big issue. Next slide, please. A background, the project began in the 1990s with the corridor cities stepping up to the plate and getting Caltrans and MTA to do a major corridor study that identified a lot of the problems in the corridor. So that was started then. Then it moved into the next phase, the environmental phase, which we've been in since 2008, which hardly seems possible, but it's been a long, hard pull with this EIS. The MTA has been delegated the lead agency status by Caltrans and FHWA. The first circulation of the environmental documents was in 2012, and then we hit the recession and the growth forecast had to be redone. So in 2017, the draft documents were recirculated. The staff received about 3,000 comments, which is quite a bit. So the document that will be produced sometime towards the fall or winter of this year will be the final documents. In the meantime, with the passages of Measure R and M, the project has $1.3 billion in Measure R&M tax funds. And there's hopefully there will be a substantial amount of matching funds from the feds through FHWA. This process will begin in earnest when we get our record of decision. In 2018, the Metro Board selected Alternative 5C, which is one additional general purpose lanes, and which is part of the freeway modernization, and most importantly, auxiliary lanes. So the cars, you won't be getting on the freeway and running right into the trucks. You'll have a greater length of time to get through to the traffic. So it's of the two alternatives that made it through the document, this one is it's less expensive, and it will probably work the best, and it can be built incrementally. The other item that's accompanying the selection of 5C is a massive program of community benefits, including community health benefits, which right now I don't think we're going to get too far in working on that. There's benefits in a clean truck program, which is part of the project. So there's a whole package of things that we will be reminding the public of. There were two board motions when 5C was selected that really restrict how this project gets rolled out. So the project rollout will be done with segments that do not require the acquisition of properties, commercial or residential properties. Next slide. So where are we now? Okay, I already gave you most of that. We're waiting on the final environmental documents, and there's some constraints and issues with approval by EPA. EPA has not signed off on the truck program as part of the project, and there was a meeting today, the outcome of which I'll find out tomorrow, I guess, whether the MTA, Caltrans, and AQMD actually managed to come to some decision on what will be acceptable as far as satisfying the requirement for clean trucks. One of the things that will be rolled out to the public will be the early action projects, those items that could be built to have independent utility, don't require tearing down once the full project is built. This project's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. The next slide, please. So the virtual community meeting will be held next Tuesday. It'll start at 6. I think it'll be simulcast in Spanish and English, so hopefully we get a maximum number of people. We want to bring the public up to date on what's going on with the project and get any kind of input we can. So if you remember correctly, the 710 project was guided by a really extensive public participation project and process, and there was community groups, the technical advisory group, which is still making most of the decisions, and the city of Downey is well represented. And as we move forward in trying to figure out how to finance and how to choose which are the beginning projects, that'll be ongoing. There are local projects that are underway, and I think 4 or 5 of them that started in 2008 are actually finished. I don't know if a Downey project was finished, but there are projects in Commerce and Southgate, Vernon, and I think Bellflower, Bell Gardens, that had actually started and were finished since the project started to be funded in 2008. So that's just what we had to offer. And if your council would like a more extensive update, you can just request one. But this is just mostly to tell you about what's coming up for the public next Tuesday. So I'll stop there and if there are any questions.
I have a couple of questions. This is Councilmember Saab.
Hi.
Hi again. 2 questions. Number one, can you just explain or elaborate a little bit what the auxiliary lane is, please?
Oh, okay. It's a lane that goes from usually an on ramp to an off ramp. So when you want to get in and out of traffic, you move over to that lane. You don't have to, cut across traffic and then try to get to the on ramp, the off ramp. And when you get on the freeway, you're not trying to merge right away into a lane that's got trucks in it. It's particularly an issue where there's a freeway to freeway connector. Like if you're coming up the 710 and you're trying to go east on the 91, you're going to get caught in a sea of trucks. So this will give you a little extra room to move over. So it's all of the merging activity takes place in this lane instead of the through lane. So it adds a little bit of capacity for those discrete movements.
Very well, thank you for that. And then the second question, obviously, I'm not asking you to sum up every comment, but was there an overwhelming theme in the 3,000 comments you received from the public?
Yeah, a lot of it was people were interested in freeway crossings. If you've ever tried to walk across the 710, most of the bridges are not pedestrian friendly. So community access, walking away from traffic, that was a big issue. There was a huge push for another alternative, community alternative 7, which did not get selected. But the community concerns were getting across the freeway, obviously air quality, and believe it or not, in the time during which this project has been going through the environmental property, there has been an improvement in air quality because of booked regulations for trucks. So the vehicle emission standards have exceeded when we started, and so the air quality is getting a little better. So those were kind of the two big areas. That, and people did not want to have residential or commercial structures taken. There is some taking. There is some condemnation of property. So, but the 5C had fewer units removed than any of the others.
Very well, thank you.
Any other questions?
I do. I have one more question. You mentioned this is for the plan or completion for 2028, but as we have these technical advisory committee and these public meetings engaged, what type of action or what type of a timeline are you looking at to proceed with these type of recommendations?
Well, I think the idea is to get the project cleared, and there are about 4 projects that are within a reasonable budget, meaning some of them are like $1 billion, but one of the projects that could be done early and could do a lot would be and this is one of the worst, is the access road from the 710 to the 91 East. That you could fix that ramp, you could widen it, straighten it out a little, and you could do that little piece, and you could do that fairly reasonably and within the 1.3 billion that's available. So that would be, one example of how to build the project. All the interchanges have that sort of utility where you can build one piece, you can make things better, you can remove some of the safety hazards. And there are all kinds of local projects. The way the money was divided under Measure R, about a third of it's going to local projects. So there are things like, exclusive right-hand turn lanes to get on the freeway so traffic doesn't back up. There are, some sidewalk improvements. So there are local projects. I should have looked up to see exactly what Downey has done, but I think Downey's has had a project. And the beauty of these local projects is they do fit into the larger project. We're not going to do throwaways. So any improvement on local streets ties into the larger project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Next up, I'm going to be asking Councilmember Rick Rodriguez to help me with the recognition of the U.S. Army 244th birthday. Would you like to go down there?
So this evening, we're celebrating the United States Army's 245th birthday, whereas the United States Army was established by the First Continental Congress on the 14th day of June in 1775. And whereas the United States Army exists to defend the freedoms of our citizens and our nation's security interests, and whereas many citizens of Missoula have served in their nation and given the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedoms as members of the United States Army, and whereas it is proper to recognize the United States Army annually on its birthday to thank those who have served and those who are presently serving. Now, therefore, myself, Rick Rodriguez, councilmember, and Blanca Pacheco, our mayor of the city of Downey in the state of California, do hereby proclaim that June 14th, 2020, as the United States Army's 245th birthday, and declare the period from June 15th through June 19th, United States Army Week. I encourage all citizens to join me in the salute as we express our gratitude to those who have served and those who are now serving to protect our nation and its freedoms. Thank you.
What we normally would have done is we would have had a cake, and we would have cut some cake, and we all would have had shared cake. But unfortunately, like I previously mentioned, this is a new normal for now. I'm hoping next year we can actually have a full house and we can have cake. So hopefully those in the audience will join us next year. And those watching us live stream can join us next year as well.
Well, hopefully the soldiers from the LA Battalion were watching online, and guys like Mario Guerra, the CASA for Los Angeles Battalion were all watching at this time, so you know how much we respect and honor our military. And it's quite fitting that we're down there doing this, and we have an Air Force dad and a Marine dad in the audience at the same time. So so thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you. I will now recess the regular city council meeting. Administrative report, Community Development Commission, Housing Successor Agency. We have one item, approve an emergency residential rental assistance program for low to moderate income Downey residents that have experienced COVID-19 related economic hardship. Executive Director Livas, do we have somebody who will be providing this report?
Madam Mayor, our Community Development Director, Aldo Schindler, will give you a report on this program.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to excuse myself to the back room. I need to abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. At our last meeting on May 26th, we discussed the implementation of an emergency residential rental assistance program for folks who've experienced economic hardship in regards to COVID-19. And with staff's recommendation and council's support, we're here tonight to present a program. Into the different rules and regulations of funding that are out there. Our first portion of funding that we decided to go after was from the state of California. We did run into an obstacle in that the state of California has a threshold of $500,000 to provide these types of services. And so with that, we wanted to achieve council's goals of funding the program at $700,000 as we discussed at last meeting. And so we discussed this internally, and we looked at our federal home program that provides these types of services as well. And so the recommendation tonight, also, not on this agenda, we'll come back to you if you folks agree at a future meeting, is to use $200,000 from the home program. That adds a slight nuance in that the home program under the federal guidelines has different income standards. And so, for instance, for a family of 4, the income threshold under the home program is $83,500. For the same size family, under the state program, it's $92,750. So once again, we have a variation there. In terms of the amount of rent subsidy that you can get from either program is pretty much equal. Also using the $200,000 from the home program will impact that home rehab program that we use for single-family homes. We usually provide service to 20 homes per fiscal year. Losing that $200,000 means we'll lose 5 projects within that program. So it's something to consider as well. In terms of the program, as mentioned, it's for those folks that have either experienced a layoff, a furlough, or a pay reduction due to COVID-19. All the programs are income guideline focused, and the state has its own income guidelines, and I have a slide in the future to show that as well. The payments are going to be made for a minimum of 1 month's rent, and the grants are going to be awarded to qualified applicants who are going to go through an eligibility process on a first-come, first-served basis.
Is that a minimum or maximum, Aldo?
Maximum. Yeah, maximum for 1 month. Sorry about that.
Oh.
The program guidelines and application are also going to be available in Spanish, and we're going to market the program through all of our social media platforms, through Nextdoor, through the Downey Patriot, outreach to our property management firms, and we also have email addresses for numerous property owners that have multifamily rental products as well. In terms of the eligibility, all of the state programs that we operate and the federal programs that we operate come with an abundance of rules, and we have to dot a lot of I's and cross a lot of T's. They're also monitored on a regular basis. We're monitored by our state programs on an annual basis, by our federal programs on an annual basis. Our finance department gets monitored on our activity as well. So we've got to make sure that we've got folks that are eligible, and we've got proof of that as well. The obvious is they have to rent in the city of Downey. They have to meet income guidelines. They have to have a lease agreement.
Is that lease agreement can it be month to month?
Yes.
Or does it have to?
Yes, can be month to month, doesn't have to be for a year as well. And we have to receive compliance from the landlord. We've got some documentation in there seeking their approval of the program. And then once again, they have to complete that program application. And staff will walk the participants through that application process. There'll be a lot of back and forth in terms of what documents are allowed to be submitted.
What is compliance from the landlord? Is it just like a form that just landlord has to agree to, or is there anything else that is required of the landlord?
No, council member, it's as you said, it's a form. It's a form that's submitted to the landlord, and they're signing it to show that they're going to participate with the program.
And it could be a management company. It doesn't have to be the actual owner. It could be like a property manager or something.
Yes, sir. It could be the property management firm as well if they've been deemed authority by the property owner. We're also going to collect a W-9 from either the property management firm or the landlord, because we are going to distribute a check directly to that landlord or property management company.
How quickly would the check get cut?
Well, our finance department works rather efficiently, so we're thinking a week and a half or 2 weeks to cut those checks.
Thank you.
Sure. This next slide is a snapshot of the income guidelines. So, we always go straight to the middle where you have a family of 4, and the income threshold is $92,750. Family of 5, for instance, you have $100,150. Those are state guidelines, and as I mentioned, the federal guidelines are different. And if we proceed with that program at our next meeting on June 23rd, I'll be in front of you again with those program guidelines that'll be very, very similar to these.
That's the cap, right? The top. Anything below each number obviously would qualify.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Yes, those are the thresholds.
Okay.
In terms of the process, once again, it's on a first come, first served basis. Our goal is to go live with this program on noon this Friday. We're working feverishly behind the scenes, trying to flesh out any nuances or glitches in the process. And so I believe we may be able to make that. If we don't, we'll notify council. We're not going to market anything until we know that we can lay out a program that's going to work seamlessly. And once again, also, before we go live, we'll notify council as well, and then market the program to folks. And the applications are going to be, well, let me take a step back. The interested parties are going to be instructed to call a dedicated phone line, and we're going to have the phone line work similar to how the hotline works for our COVID-19, and that's going to roll over to a couple different lines. We know that there's going to be a lot of calls. If we roll those lines over to various staff people, we think we'll be able to serve as many people as we can through that phone-in process. We have a very short intake form that we're going to use for screening. Ask people's name, their family size, their unit size, their annual income. That will then allow us to move forward with sending applications to people. Applications can be distributed or collected in person at City Hall. They can be distributed by mail through U.S. Postal Service or by email. What we did learn in regards to our hotline through COVID-19 is that we do have a percentage of folks that don't have access to a computer or don't have knowledge on how to use a computer. When we surveyed cities that actually ran out these programs, there's not a lot of them. A lot of the cities are coming out at the same time. But Claremont, for one, doesn't allow for paper submissions based on COVID-19. They only allow for email or website submissions. County of LA doesn't allow for paper submissions based on COVID-19, only applications by phone or by website. The City of LA is going to roll out their program in July, so they haven't fleshed out exactly how they're going to take in applications. Once again, we defaulted back to our own population here in Downey in terms of what their needs are, and so we decided to go this way. And so final eligibility will be determined, as I mentioned, upon a complete application, and we'll do our best to work with folks to get to that point. There may be some folks that aren't eligible. There may be some folks that aren't able to complete an application. That's a process that we'll go through. And then once again, after completing that application and collecting the required forms from the landlord, we'll be able to distribute a check to the landlord as well.
And although this package that you included as part of the reports is very detailed with all of the forms, is this sort of package that individuals seeking or applying for this program will receive?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly as we have it.
Exactly as you have it in your agenda memo. As I mentioned, we also have a Spanish version as well.
It's very detailed, by the way. Very, very well put together, very detailed. Thank you.
Well, that concludes my presentation. Once again, if we decide to proceed also with the 200,000, I think that's more of a discussion tonight. We're ready to come back at the next meeting on June 23rd and present that item.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
No, I think no, I don't have any further questions. I just think that given the economic climate we are facing as a country, but certainly our city, and given this need and the opportunity to help those that have been severely impacted, looking at, based on, Aldo, what you've indicated, the coming year and then the following, 5 homes from the project, the rehabilitation project that we have, would be impacted. And so, but given the circumstances that we have faced, I think that is, I know, Madam Mayor, that I would be very supportive of this because it really warrants us are moving forward and supporting those individuals that have been affected.
Yes, thank you. And I also have to mention I noticed the forms here are well put together. So great job on the presentation. And I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. This is something that our community needs. So great job. So
Madam
what
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Aldo, for the presentation. Really well prepared. Thank you so much for that. To do the extra 200,000, would that require us to vote on that now, or just give direction to staff, or how would that work?
Actually, Councilmember Sean, Mr. Ashton, excuse me, if you could just give us
Sean's fine, it's
yeah,
all good.
direction on that, we'll bring that forward for next meeting.
Okay.
So I
Thank-
guess, do we have to, after we take public comment, do we have to take two motions, or can it be one motion? One motion? Okay, okay. That was a great question, Sean. Now we will open it up to public comment. Members of the public wishing to speak regarding this item may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record, and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers on the phone?
We do not, Mayor.
City Clerk Duarte, do we have any written public comments to be read into the record for this item?
We do not, Mayor.
Is there any members of the audience who wish to address the council regarding this item? If you do, please come forward. Seeing none, we will now close the public comment period. Is there a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, oh, I'm sorry, we have to take a roll call. City Clerk Duarte, can we take a roll call, please? Vote?
Yes. Commissioner Ashton?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez? I'm sorry, he's abstaining. Commissioner Saab?
Yes.
Vice Chair Frometa?
Yes.
And Chair Pacheco?
Yes.
The motion was approved with Commissioner Rodriguez abstaining from this item.
Thank you. I will now adjourn the Community Development Commission Housing Successor Agency and reconvene the regular City Council meeting. It is now the time for non-agenda public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the City Council regarding non-agenda public comment may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record, and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. Before we begin the non-agenda public comment period, I would like to remind members of the public participating telephonically that the city's meeting rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting, even if you are participating telephonically. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address the council on issues that are within the city's jurisdiction. Since we are under a federal, state, and local emergency declaration and Los Angeles County's Safer at Home order, I will limit this non-agenda public comment period to 30 minutes pursuant to Downey Municipal Code Section 2105, subsection G. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, first speaker.
Hello, please state your name and begin speaking. Can you hear me? Please state your name and begin speaking. Can you hear me? Let me try the other call, Mayor.
Okay.
Hello, please state your name and begin speaking.
Yes, this is Joey from the city of Downey. I am calling once again because there's a lot of big issues affecting my city, unfortunately, and the city council has been incompetent to do anything about it. For one, Ms. Frometa and Pacheco, if you guys are going to talk about how you deal with issues and peace, as issues arise, remember that you guys were the ones who wanted to start an ad hoc subcommittee to silence the First Amendment of people protesting you for calling you out on your incompetence. Second, if you guys are going to open businesses, and I know Ms. Frometa is super pro-business, you got to at least be honest with not only your businesses, but the people of Downey. We have 900 cases of COVID-19 here in the city alone, making it one of the highest in the LA County. And while you're talking about opening businesses, you're at least not saying the numbers that people need to be aware about. So tell them the truth and stop holding things from them. Third, you have heard about the allegations of racism in our schools. Now, whether they're valid or not, enough attention has been brought to warrant an investigation. I want this city council to do everything in its power to verify what is going on in our school systems, whether these allegations are true or not, and if there is racism, to take immediate action to address that. Now, with that said, here we go to the most important part. The assistant manager who has instigated an assault and is on video has still not been removed. You have been presented for months with evidence, and you refuse to do anything about it. Now, that may be because there's a conflict of interest. And by conflict of interest, I mean that the people trying to privatize our water at the Central Basin, which is Olivares and Madruga, you, Ms. Pacheco, you work for them now. You have a clear conflict of interest running a city that is in litigation against the Central Basin, while at the same time working for the attorneys that are suing that agency. So no, you should not be making any decisions on behalf of our city because you have a clear conflict of interest. And I assure you, when you show up to be a city attorney of Bell Gardens, if that happens, there will be activists waiting to call you out on your corruption over there as well. So do something about it and take immediate action. Second, I also need to bring up other issues that are taking place in our city. You, Ms. Pacheco, were on a phone call on minutes when the assembly held a meeting in Sacramento to privatize our water by passing a bill called SB 625.
Joey, your time is up.
You said her name. You said Downey was.
Any other callers?
Yes, Mayor, we have one call. Please state your name and begin speaking. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, please state your name and begin speaking.
Yes, my name is Brian Heyman. I'd like to commend Chief Milligan, his commanders, and all of the officers who were assigned to the various protests and demonstrations in the city over the last week. I had the opportunity to observe the protests, and I was pleased and reassured to see our police department out in force, making sure that the demonstrations and protests were peaceful for all. And indeed they were. And I just wanted to, again, express my thanks to Chief Milligan and all of his officers. Every one of them that I encountered, although it was a stressful assignment for them, I'm sure was courteous, respectful, and even gracious. At one point, I got a little overheated with the hot weather and needed some water, and one of the officers ran inside the police station and got me some ice cold water. Very kind. And I think that we have one of the best police departments in all of Los Angeles County serving the citizens of Downey, and we are very fortunate indeed. And it was a very successful protest and demonstration, and it's reassuring to know that our police department will support everyone turning out to express their constitutional rights in peaceful protest. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Not on the phone, Mayor.
No? Do we have any written public comments on non-agenda items to be read into the record?
Yes, Mayor, we have a letter from Linda Asset. She's a resident, and it's regarding Central Water Basin. Over 2 million people in the service area of the Central Basin Water District will be disenfranchised and no longer be represented by the officials they elected. 70% are Latino. Latino legislators are allowing for the transfer to happen without public engagement, notice, or participation via a gut and amend fast-track bill. The public ownership, local control of their water would go to an agency that serves, among other areas, the west side of the county, whose mission and purpose is to recharge the groundwater, not serve as a wholesaler and public water rights defender for the region which the Central Basin serves. Senator Bradford is the author, and he has less than 10% of the constituents in that district, while Archuleta has over 90% of the constituents. There are a number of problems with this bill. Removing elected representation, presenting problems the board Central Basin had in the past that are not issues today. More importantly, it sets a precedent. This is a wrong, and if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. We need our communities to speak up and use your rights to support the opposition of SB 625. Senator Bob Archuleta, California 32nd Senate District. It appears Senator Archuleta was not properly informed of the water grab that was coordinated by the assembly members in that region. The bill also makes numerous misrepresentations about the Central Basin. The following facts clarify many of the misrepresentations present in the Senate bill. Central Basin has a general manager. Central Basin is delivering safe and affordable water through the Metropolitan Water District as it always has. Central Basin is a wholesaler. Central Basin has a general counsel. Central Basin is physically solvent and is financially stable. 8 million in reserves and approximately 100 million in assets. Central Basin enacted all 33 recommendations by the California State Auditor in 2015, thus cured all their concerns. 5 elections have occurred since the 2015 audit, and this is a completely different board than the one represented in those scandals. Central Basin Board never authorized an illegal trust fund mentioned in the bill. It was created by foremost Central Basin lawyers without the knowledge of the board. The Central Basin Board sued and recovered $2.35 million and returned it to the agency where it belongs, and it's why that attorney resigned. Opposed Senate Bill 625 because it violates all notice rules and due process. SB 625 was introduced 12 days ago. That's all the time we have for that comment. And that's all, Mayor.
That's all. Members of the audience who wish to address the council regarding non-agenda items may now come forward and form a line while maintaining social distancing. Do we have anyone wishing to make a comment?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable Council. My name is Rudy Meyer. I'm a long-term resident of the city of Downey. I've lived in Downey for about 30 years. With your indulgence, I would like to refer to myself as we in giving my presentation for this evening. We have been disturbed with regards, we are the silent majority. We've been disturbed with regards to what is going on in our state, in our nation. The question is law enforcement. We've seen various states, cities, counties, LA mayor call for reforms, defunding, call for the elimination of certain restraints that were useful, even to the point of eliminating an entire department. It's a great insult to the men and women who wear the uniform and serve our community. I don't have to tell you that laws make our society. Without laws, we cannot have society. Laws are central to the defense of our Constitution. It is central to due process, our Bill of Rights. I ask you, council members, I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, the calls are right now to cater to the appeasement of the protesters. Give them what they want, appease them. Make their demands, get rid of your departments, implement sometimes these unreasonable reforms of your police department. I ask you to be stern. I ask you to uphold the principles that you were sworn to uphold. I ask you to be courageous and to be brave and stand out. I ask you to embrace the Constitution. There's no doubt that the job that is performed by the men and women in our police department is something that many of us cannot do or wouldn't even dare to do. They put their lives at risk. And then to give the insult that let's defund them, let's reform them because they're all a bunch of bad apples. One instance of a person committing something outside of the department's policy, doing something that was not sanctioned by the department, but yet they want to get rid of their entire department. This is in Minneapolis. And then in Los Angeles, LAPD, the most diverse department, has had several reforms. I was here during the 92 riots, and there were reforms after reforms and changes after changes. But still, appeasement has never worked. It never will work. And there is a temptation to cater to a protester who demands, we want to do something with your police department. We will threaten you and put the pressure on you until you cave in, until you get rid of your department. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to be brave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. We really appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, can I say something real
Yes,
quick? Sir, what's your name?
Oh, my name is Rudy Meyer, sir.
So Rudy, I'm a father of a police officer, and I want to tell you thank you for your comments.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
And thank you for being one of the first individuals to come back to our council meeting.
Oh.
We really appreciate it. It's always nice to see members of the public coming to our council meeting. So hopefully you can join us again.
Thank you, Ms.
We thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. Now is the time for consent calendar items. Members of the public wishing to address the city council regarding consent calendar items may now call for teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers?
We do not, Mayor.
Do we have any written public comments on any consent calendars to be read into the record?
We do not, Mayor.
Do we have any members of the audience who wish to address the council regarding consent calendar items? If so, please come forward. Seeing none, we will now close the public comment period. Are there any council members that would like to remove or abstain from an item?
So, Madam Mayor, I
Mayor.
need to abstain from item number 5, number 6, and number 9. I have a conflict with those.
Madam Mayor, I need to abstain from item number 2, special meeting minutes of May 26th, as I was not here.
And the same, I'm
Abstain
The
from
same as
items
well.
numbers 8 and 9. Projects are within 1,000 feet of my home.
And this is Alex Saab. I'm going to be abstaining from item number 7. It's within the parameters of my place of employment.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
Make a motion.
second.
Second.
City Clerk Duarte, can we take a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Maybe if she can read the abstentions to the record, just to make sure, because I know there were quite a few.
Yes, Councilmember Saab. I have Councilmember Rodriguez abstaining from item number 5, number 6, number 9, and number 2.
Yes.
Councilmember Ashton abstaining from items number 8 and 9. Councilmember Staub abstaining from item number 7. And Councilmember Frometa abstaining from item number 2.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ashton,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Saab,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frometa,
Yes.
and Mayor Pacheco.
Yes. We are now on to administrative reports. We have 3 this evening. One of them is to receive and file a report regarding the implementation of roundabouts within the city of Downey. City Manager Rivas, do we have someone who will be providing us a report?
Madam Mayor, we do have a report that will be given by Ed Norris, our Deputy Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, and staff. I'm here this evening to educate you on the subject of roundabouts. So we'll get right to it. By definition, a roundabout is a type of intersection traffic control which requires traffic to circulate in a counterclockwise direction, traffic entering the roundabout to yield the right-of-way to vehicles already traveling within the roundabout.
Ed, before you, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Just a little bit of background. This item is on the agenda at the behest of Councilmember Ashton, who asked us to look into roundabouts as a potential traffic calming measure. So just as a background, I should say.
Thank you. Now, there are two types of roundabouts. There is the conventional roundabout, which is the larger roundabout that you would see on the larger roadways, and then the mini roundabouts, which are designed to fit within a typical intersection of two residential collector or minor arterial streets, and typically what would be implemented within our city. What does a roundabout consist of? Well, it consists of, number one, a central island, splitter islands, quote unquote, on approaches which force traffic to veer to the right, yield limit lines at the approaches which require motorists entering the roundabout to yield the right-of-way to traffic already circulating within the roundabout, marked crosswalks which are set back from the approaches, on the approaches to the roundabout. And now the central and the splitter islands may be either raised or flush with the pavement, depending on the size of the roundabout. Now here is a layout of a typical roundabout. If I can find my laser pen here. And just to point out the various design elements, here is the central island, the circular island you see in there in the middle, which forces traffic to circulate in the counterclockwise direction within the circle or roundabout. These are the splitter islands on the approaches. And again, they be, depending on the size of the roundabout, they may be either raised or flush with the pavement or otherwise painted. The raised central and splitter islands are more effective because obviously you can't drive over them. And then you have the yield lines, limit lines at the entrance to the roundabout, and the marked crosswalks. As you can see, the crosswalks are set back one vehicle length from the approaches of the roundabout, which differ from the conventional intersection. Now here is a photo of an actual roundabout. This was taken in the city of Long Beach at the intersection of Examino Avenue and Vista Street. What are the advantages of roundabouts? They result in less delay typically than a standard intersection control, provide a higher level of safety, most notably a 30% reduction in right-angle collisions compared to conventional intersection traffic control.
And sorry, less delay than like a stop sign or a stoplight, right? Is that what you mean?
That's right, yes. A roundabout is an alternative to either a stop-controlled intersection or a signalized intersection. It's in other words, another type of intersection control. So yeah, compared to the stop-controlled and signalized intersections, the roundabouts typically result in less delay, yield a higher level of safety, have the traffic calming benefit, and that they can tend to discourage speeds. And they also have environmental benefits as well through the reduced emissions, fuel consumption, and noise because of the less delay compared to other types of intersection control. Now, having said that, the roundabout can also have various disadvantages, namely acceptance by the public, which the public may not accept them because they may not know how to drive through them. It's something they're not used to seeing. If you live in Europe, you see them all over the place, but in the States, they're not as common. They may be disrespected by motorists if the minor street volumes are too low, and roundabouts cannot give priority to one direction of travel or type of vehicle over another, such as an emergency vehicle or a transit vehicle, etc., which a traffic signal, for instance, would be able to do. And lastly, trucks and other large vehicles may have difficulty navigating through the roundabout, such as a typical moving van, for instance.
Can you go back to the advantages real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So 30% reduction in right angle collisions.
Typically, yes. And these are the more severe type of collisions. In other words, it's not.
T-bone.
I'm sorry?
Like a T-bone?
I had a
Yes,
question.
exactly.
Is there a reason why it would be reduced emissions? Is it because is there a reason behind that? Like
Yes, because
the idling?
there's fewer stops.
Got it.
And there's fewer deceleration stops and accelerations compared to other types of intersection control.
And then on the disadvantage, well, I mean, we haven't done it here in the city, but are the immediate neighbors, the four corners, I guess you could say, assuming it's a residential area, is that typically, and I don't know, you haven't had our city, so I don't know if you had any experience, but is that something that those neighbors have a particular problem with, usually?
Are you referring to the adjacent properties
Yeah,
to
I'm
the
sorry.
intersection?
I'm sorry, I wasn't very descriptive. I guess my question is, so you know how in the past we did the speed bumps, and one of the typical complaints were from the people that live, in front of the speed bump or adjacent in front of it,
Yes.
because of the noise or whatnot.
Right.
Is that common in people that live in the immediate vicinity of the roundabout?
Oh,
or
no.
is there a common complaint?
No. The roundabouts are probably even quieter than, say, a stop-controlled intersection because you have the fewer stops, fewer accelerations. So you probably, I would say no, the noise would probably be less.
I have a question, Ed. Do we know if these have any sort of impact in terms of property values? I've seen quite a few of these in Pasadena. I travel to Pasadena with a high degree of regularity every week, and they are particularly in residential areas down Los Robles. And so I would like to know if there's any impact to property value, and then if we know the approximate cost a mini roundabout would be. And thirdly, if we have identified any specific points within our city. I know that Councilmember Ashton had brought this to staff to look further, but and I know you're not done with your presentation, but some food for thought. Have we looked at specifically some areas within our city where these may be something to think about?
We have, and to answer your first question, Council Member from Ed, I couldn't tell you about impact on property values. That's something that would have to be researched, but I can't think of, I would assume that the impact is negligible on property values, number one.
I can,
Second of all,
actually, on that particular issue, it, typically the roundabouts are in residential areas, and I'm actually familiar with Pasadena, the area, many of where they're located, and some of them are in some of the more Tony neighborhoods, nicer neighborhoods. And actually, as Ed indicated before, the residents typically around those seem to support them because you're not screeching to a stop or accelerating or decelerating. So typically, they're something that people would prefer over a stop sign, and they're usually dressed up a little bit nicer as well. That said, we typically, several years ago, I think Mr. Osco, you were here when we started this. We have a policy for calming, traffic calming measures that we spent some time on, and typically you go through a couple of stages of things before you get to something like this that is a little bit more dramatic or more expensive. So there are typically a couple of other steps that you would go. You know, our goal here is to, if we get to that step, is this something that ultimately the council would want us to adopt as a policy, as one of those calming measures is moving forward. Go ahead.
And going back, do we have an idea of approximate cost?
Yes, he'll.
we do, and that's actually on my last
Yeah,
slide.
yeah.
So. And let me quickly just go through this slide, and then I'll answer your question. When should the roundabout be used, you might be asking. Well, they're most appropriate at locations on streets with speed limits of 30 miles per hour or less, and at intersections with a total daily entering volume of 15,000 vehicles per day or less, with at least 10% of the total entering volume on the minor street. Intersections which meet warrants for a traffic signal, and also ones with heavy left turns. Now, this will answer your question specifically. We did look at the intersection of Brookshire and Cherokee Drive, just to the north of here, and what we feel would be a good candidate, could be a good candidate for a mini roundabout, given that it currently meets the warrants for signalization. It could have a traffic calming benefit, particularly given the history of the speeding complaints on Brookshire Avenue between Cherokee and Florence. And they would reduce delay in queuing, particularly on school days, because as you all know, on days when Downey High School gets out in the afternoon, the queuing northbound in Brookshire can be very extensive. So that's something that the roundabout could address. It could reduce the delays in the queuing, as well as possibly have a traffic calming benefit. Now, the estimated cost at this particular intersection is just $100,000. And that is preliminary at this point, but very conservative, not knowing the specifics at this point. But to answer your question about cost, the cost of the mini roundabout can vary, actually, anywhere from $50,000 on up, and all depending on the complexity, depending on the size of the intersection, etc. And if right-of-way needs to be acquired, how much reconstruction of the intersection is possible. Do any drainage structures need to be relocated? One potential impact is the impact to driveways on adjacent residential properties, because you see the crosswalks, where the crosswalks are located. These are curb ramps. You have to put in 8 curb ramps per intersection. And they're not typically the curb ramp would be here at a conventional intersection. But once you put in the mini roundabout, the curb ramps need to be relocated back here on the approaches. a resident has a driveway here, the driveway is gonna need to be relocated, so that's gonna be an impact to the adjacent residential property. So that's one thing to consider. So when you add it, again, it all depends on the level of complexity of the intersection and how much, if any right-of-way needs to be acquired. Are you gonna include landscaping? Do you need to increase the street lighting? A lot of factors come into play. So, I'm sorry, whoa, getting a little ahead of myself here, but that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to entertain more questions.
So Ed, do you have any, knowing the city as well as you know, do you have any certain this could apply to or we could benefit from?
Well, the intersection of Brookshire and Cherokee, we did take a look at. We did consider, several intersections throughout the city, and at this point, we feel that is the best candidate because of the congestion at the intersection. And it just so happens that we evaluated the intersection for signalization. We did a signal warrant study, and it does meet the warrants for traffic signals. So the current state guidelines say, published by Caltrans, say, well, in lieu of installing a traffic signal, we really should first take a look to see if a roundabout would be an appropriate method of intersection control versus a traffic signal. And this may be a good candidate for a roundabout versus a traffic signal.
That was the only intersection at this point that was looked at? Were there any others?
We did look at a few more, for instance, on Downey Avenue at both 2nd and 3rd Streets through the downtown area, which also we evaluated quite a few years back, which also meet the warrants for signalization. But those are two intersections which may also, where roundabouts might be more appropriate than a traffic signal. However, the impacts we figured would be too extensive. The sizes of the intersections, the streetscape features, the artwork might be impacted. So we didn't give those any further consideration. But those, just to name a few, those are the ones we've looked at so far, a little bit more in detail.
Thank you, Ed.
Ed, can you go back to the picture from that you took of the roundabout in Long Beach?
Sure.
So with that, is that a similar type of intersection that we would have, that you proposed with Brookshire and Cherokee?
It is somewhat similar, yes. Examino Avenue is a minor arterial in Long Beach, somewhat similar to Brookshire, although probably doesn't quite have the volume of Brookshire. And Vista Street is the east-west street here.
And other than Brookshire and Cherokee, we don't have any other intersections that would possibly qualify besides, like you mentioned, like on Downey Avenue, but besides those that you mentioned, we don't have any others in the city that would
Ed, hold on a second. So, Councilmember Ashton, one of the things, I don't want to get too far ahead of the game here. We didn't do a full study of all the intersections in town. What we wanted to really find out is this something in the arsenal for traffic calming? Is that something that you as a council want us to have and look for and to with? The next step was if it is, then what we would do is then we would take a more comprehensive look at intersections throughout the city and then come back to you and say, okay, here's the list of the top 4 or 5 places in the city that these can be employed in. So we're not there yet. I mean, what we're going off of really is sort of past history, which is Brookshire and Downey Avenue, but we really haven't done a thorough study. So I didn't want to put Ed on the spot on this particular issue because we haven't really gotten that far yet.
Okay, that helped a lot because I was somewhat confused in a sense, but I think knowing that you're just kind of presenting this
Yes.
as an informational thing,
That's all it is.
I mean, that kind of helps. I personally would like to see where else this could possibly work in the city. I think something like this would be really beneficial to help with a lot of the speeding we have on our residential streets, especially some of the longer stretches like Reeves and even Old River possibly. You have a lot of other you mentioned Brookshire, Downey Avenue. So we have a lot of streets where you get those kind of long stretches where you get a lot of people kind of raising their speed limits, and I think something like this would really deter that.
So what, from a staff perspective, what we're looking for is direction as to whether or not these roundabouts are something that you guys want to include in your toolbox. There are some cities that outright just don't like them. They simply say they prefer a standard stop sign or signalization. As Ed alluded to in his presentation, the acceptance level of people driving through them, they get a little confused and they're not exactly sure that, how do you get from one side of the street to the other side of the street? Do you keep going around the circle? So there are some cities that just don't permit them because they just don't like them. So what we want to know as a staff, is this something that you want to include in the toolbox? And then if that's the case, then we would come back to you with a list of cities, a list of locations for your consideration.
I really would be interested personally.
I second that. I would be interested in taking a look.
I think this is a great idea, especially with the street the intersection that you mentioned, Cherokee and Brookshire. I've noticed that there's a lot of backup with people that are trying to go straight, and sometimes you see people trying to cut other people off. They're trying to go from the right turning lane into the other lane, so I know it can be a mess over there. So I think it is a good idea. But before we take a motion, I'm going to go ahead and open this item up to public comment. Members of the public, and thank you for the presentation. Members of the public wishing to speak regarding item number 18 may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers on the phone?
We do not, Mayor.
Do we have any written public comments on this item to be read into the record?
We do not.
Any members of the audience who wish to address the council regarding this item may now step forward. Seeing none, this public comment period will now be concluded. Is there any further comments or questions regarding this report?
So we're moving to receive and file, and then to have city staff look into possible other intersections that we could possibly use this for? Is that the motion?
Is that the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea, and I appreciate, bringing this up. We just also have to be conscious of the expense, right? I mean, it sounds like this could get really expensive. Obviously we're gonna look at that, and if it does come back to us, if we can see, I don't know if Measure R funds would qualify for this, or, I know we're gonna, staff will take a look at that, but it seems like this could get really expensive also. We just have to be, as always, conscious of that.
Yeah, what we'll do as we bring these back to you, we'll bring back what a typical traffic calming measure would look like in terms of cost, and what a roundabout would be in terms of cost, and then you can make a determination in terms of which direction you'd like to go.
Yeah, it seems like that. I know I'm being premature here, but the Cherokee and Brookshire seem to be one that would be, that's kind of a busy one, right? It just seemed like if we were going to start with one, we'd probably want to do one that's maybe a little bit less impactful in an area. It seemed like that one there's going to be a lot of opinions on that one. I can tell you that.
That was purely for,
teenage drivers
for,
getting out
for,
of
for
school.
informational only. We're not suggesting that wouldn't be the first one, but it's just
No,
more
I
for-
know,
yeah,
I know,
yeah.
that's why I said I'm being premature.
Okay, so we have a first and we have a second. City Clerk Duarte, can we take a roll call vote, please?
I'm sorry, Mayor, who made the motion?
I believe it was Councilmember Ashton and Mayor Pro Tem made a second.
Councilmember Ashton?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Saab?
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Frometa?
Yes.
And
yes.
Mayor Pacheco?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion was approved unanimously.
Thank you. The next administrative report is discussion and direction regarding urgency ordinance establishing a temporary moratorium on evictions for commercial tenants impacted by COVID-19 pandemic and a repayment period for unpaid rent. City Manager Livas, do we have somebody providing us this report?
Actually, this is Councilmember Ashton's item. He requested it to, as a discussion item, so I'll defer to Mr. Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Manager Livas. Really quick, so we had this discussion on April 2nd, and we went with the temporary moratorium on the evictions, and then just a 3-month payment window after we end the local emergency. Right now, we're going into our 3rd month of people missing. Basically, we had April, May, and now June, so it's 3 months of people not being able to possibly pay their rent, and to give, like 3 months to make up for 3 months. That's a double rent for people once we get out of this. And if it goes any further without adjusting the time frame of opportunity to pay, I think it's going to create a bigger issue down the road. So I propose something where we kind of stagger it, because I don't want it to be like the blanket thing. But like right now, we've gone 2 months in the local emergency, and once we pass June 15th, that'll be a 3rd month. So basically, for every month, I'd like to give people the opportunity to have 3 months to pay for the 1 month that they missed. So everything's there in the staff report. I was just hoping to get support for this to help with that.
So Councilmember Ashton, this is Mayor Pro Tem Frometa. Are you proposing we look at the 9 months repayment for the 3 months that individuals have been out? Is that what your proposal is? 3 months for every month?
We have so basically, it's not necessarily just the 9 month. It's like assuming, taking this out into the future, assuming we're still kind of under the same conditions. Basically, every month that we're under this local emergency, I would like to have an opportunity for people to have 3 months to make up that 1 month. So it's not just a 9 month or a 6 month, or I'm not trying to make it a locked set of time. I'm trying to make it based off of the length of the emergency. So as it says, in the staff report, assuming it goes from, through June 15th, they get 6 months. After June 15th, so from June 16th to July 16th, then it's 9 months. After July 17th, then they would get 12 months. So basically, it's a staggered approach.
3 months for every month.
I'm hoping that's clear.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was clear.
Mayor and Council, I did want to mention that the urgency ordinance that you adopted prohibiting or putting a moratorium on evictions for commercial tenants, that entire ordinance expired on May 31st. So if we're going to do this repayment, I'd need some direction as if it would be in the context of also reestablishing that moratorium on evictions from for commercial renters, as we had originally, as you had originally adopted.
I would be in support of that as well. I believe that we need to help our businesses in the sense that if they're struggling to make their rent payments on this, we need to do whatever we can to be helpful to those business entities. And, actually, I think we should, back in April, I think we should have at least made it to where we keep the moratorium until the end of our local emergency, and I'd like to propose that we do that as well.
So can we discuss what the process is to lift the emergency? Because, I mean, what happens if this thing doesn't get lifted for 2 years or a year and a half? I mean, that's city manager, can you tell me what the process is for that, please?
Well, I'm going to defer that to our city attorney to answer.
Yeah, under the state law, it would just take a resolution of the council to terminate the local emergency. That's all. When the council believes that it's time to end it, we'd put a resolution in front of you, and you would take formal action to terminate the local emergency at that point, and it would go into effect immediately.
Thank you. Is it safe to say that pretty much every city in the state is still under a declaration of emergency?
I would say most cities are. I'm sure.
Orange County seems to be doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say most cities are, but it's right now it's kind of it's a hodgepodge. There's some cities that have declared it to be over sooner than others. So.
In LA County,
no.
I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but does anybody know? I mean, if are all cities still in LA County at least under that declaration?
Well, there's 88 cities, so I haven't really polled it, so I couldn't tell you how many. But just in talking to other city managers, and most of them still have something in place.
I think as long as the governor, as long as we are under the guidance of that, the 4 stages that the governor has laid out, we are still going to be in some sort of state of emergency, and I think we are just entering that stage 3 of reopening our businesses.
I also wanted to mention, just to give you a little more guidance, the governor on the residential renters side, he basically extended the right of cities to adopt their own moratoriums on evictions through July 28th. So you could use that template and apply it here and make that moratorium effective until July 28th, and then right before that expires, we can bring it back. If you want to extend it, you'd have the authority to extend it if you needed to.
And then we could have the repayment period begin either after that date?
Yes, the way I've written these ordinances is that the repayment period would start to run once the council terminated the local emergency. So once you adopted that resolution saying no more emergency in the city of Downey, then that repayment period, whatever that would be, would start to run from that date. We could do it in other ways, but that's how we originally wrote the ordinances.
Most cities, what they've done is, rather than try to create their own, they've been following the state's lead. For example, we followed the state's lead on establishing the moratorium, right? And so some cities are following the state's lead in terms of when it ends. So July 28th, for example, would be one. So you can say between now and July 28th, whatever that rent time period is, deferment of rent, and then calculate, I think as Mr. Ashton has put forth, it's essentially it's 3 months for every month of 3 months of repayment for every month of rent. So,
I think 2 months for every month is reasonable. I think you know, I, I struggle in some ways. I realize it is so important to help the individuals that have been impacted, and yet I see our cities and our economy opening back up, and so I really want to balance need versus, again, continuing to impact individuals that rely on those rents, right? So I think we really need to look at this from all angles, and I think we have. We've had these conversations. So doing something that is reasonable, and we continue to we have this rental assistance program from our city. There's been also additional programs that have been rolled out from the state and the federal government. And so I think we need to, and again, looking at overall the economic impact of everything we have, just really taking a hard look. I think 2 months for every month seems to me as a more reasonable approach rather than 3 for every one.
I think that in the private business world, the government has no place to intervene. This is the first time I've ever been involved in this conversation, because commercial is not residential, but still, it's landlord-tenant, same thing. I think that, landlords, it's their responsibility to deal with their tenants, to keep them there, and it's cheaper and more efficient, and it works out better for the landlord to keep his tenant there as long as he can. If he's going to work whatever deal he has to work, to carry them for 3 months or 2 months or 9 months. It's really up to the landlord to extend that helping hand. I don't understand the government's need to put their hand involved in that and say it's 2 months repayment or 3 months repayment or no repayment or penalty or fine. I mean, I just don't see that's my personal opinion. I think that, yes, there is definitely a need. We have our business community all through our city, especially the pandemic. We were talking about the restaurants earlier, and how we want to get them open right away. I think that our efforts should be geared toward getting our business community up and running, more so than being the accountant for rent collection. And so, but I mean, look at whatever our council agrees to do, I'll go along with. I just think that at some point in time, we need to separate ourselves from business, free enterprise business, to government affairs. So I didn't know, Sean, did you happen to have a lot of requests from commercial property owners or commercial tenants that asked you to bring this to the council?
This was something I remember, we brought up back in April, but like for me, most of the requests I get are for the residential issues. But to me, it's like you said, it's tenant and renter, and it's kind of a similar thing. I see your end of it, and I appreciate that. To me, it's just a similar thing to the residential issue.
I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Fometa about the 2 months, and also with Councilmember Rodriguez. I think that I think I would be. I mean, just obviously discuss it. I mean, I think maybe maybe a continuance for 30 more days. It seems like we are approaching the tail end of this thing, and obviously we're all proud of what we voted on tonight on the residential assistance program, and that seems to be it's going to kick in July, and now that we're in June, I think I would be comfortable maybe extending this one more month, and then with the 2 month interval, like Mayor Pro Tem said, and basically the same that we did last time. We said we'll take a look at it again. I think the council, we've shown that we're open to it. Obviously, we all have the same intent here to help, all parties involved. We're all subject to all this effects of this coronavirus. So, I mean, I think that I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, maybe extending it 30 days into the July, and then that way we can, I guess revisit it and see how how the economy comes back and especially that rental assistance program is going to kick in by then. So hopefully, those two things together that we're doing as a city to help our residents and our businesses will have the effect that we want it to help.
So the
I'm
30
much
days.
confused only because like this item here is the commercial one. So the residential thing we did earlier won't affect this at all.
That is correct.
So that part of it will, that for the next item, that's the residential issue, the item.
Oh, right. You're right.
But if you guys, for this one, if you feel that 2 months is fair for the commercial tenants, that's fine. I think I can go with that.
So would the
And-
30 days be to
And
the end of
moratorium
the,
till- you were suggesting, Alex, to when in July, like the beginning of July, the end of July?
Well, I'll be bringing it back on the 23rd of June for formal adoption.
Okay.
So would it be July 28th?
oh, yes.
And then it would, if you wanted to extend it, we'd bring it in your second meeting in July?
Be the 14th, I think.
Right.
Is that how you wanted
as
to work?
Sean said, would that be, because this expired May 31st, so if we bring it back June 28th or 26th, whatever you said, it will be retroactive to June 1st?
No.
So can,
So.
so is there gonna be a gap
since-
there? I mean.
Yes, right now we
I'm
have
sorry,
a
I'm just
gap.
confused.
We have to adopt it right now?
No. Right now we have a gap. There's
Oh,
no
okay.
ordinance in place right now because your ordinance expired. So on the 23rd, I'd bring back the ordinance with your direction as discussed here, and you'd adopt a new urgency ordinance that related to commercial renters, the moratorium on evictions and the repayment period. That's what we would do on the 23rd, and that would run, I'm hearing that it would run 30 days.
So to July 28th?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And there's no way to go retroactive with that?
No, ordinances can't be retroactive.
Okay.
Where's the teeth in this thing? I don't really understand. We're talking about of an ordinance. There's no money out of pocket. We're just kind of giving our rubber stamp of approval saying, here, we want to help you not pay your rent and then catch up later on.
And that's a good point. This is really for the benefit of renters, so that if they were to find themselves in an eviction proceeding,
right.
they could use this ordinance to be able to defend against an eviction by saying, hey, the city adopted this repayment period.
Right.
And I'm still in the repayment period, you can't evict me.
Right.
Or if they wanted to try to evict now, they'd have this moratorium, said no, that, the city Downey adopted this moratorium. I do have to tell you though, that technically the courts aren't hearing evictions right now.
Right.
They're barely gonna open on the 22nd of June, and there's criminal matters and domestic, family law matters that are taking precedence,
Right.
just so you know that. But essentially, it's really for the tenants.
Okay.
The ordinance is really for the tenants.
Right on. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So it would be for 4 months, right? Essentially, because we started in March, April, May, and July, right? Because we're skipping June, right? We have a gap, right? So it'd be for 4 months, which would be for 4 months, and then you have 2 months for each of those for repayment. So you have 8 months to pay back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems reasonable to me as well. Okay.
Look, I'm just going to write it as a moratorium on evictions with a repayment period that is 2 months for every month that's in arrears.
Yes.
And then we'd leave it at that. And that should take care of the concerns about, the gap and whether we had a gap or not. We'll cover all that. So that's how we'll read. And
Okay.
then it'll expire on the 28th of July, and I'll bring it back, your second meeting in July.
July 14th, I think.
Let's see, July 14th, yeah. Yeah, it would come back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So before we take a vote, we're gonna open it up to public comment. Members of the,
Councilman Ashton, are you good with that?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
before we take a vote, we're going to open it up for public comment. Members of the public wishing to speak regarding item number 19, this item may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers?
Mayor, we don't have any phone calls.
Do we have any written public comments to be read into the record for this item?
We do not.
Are there any members of the audience who wish to address the council? If you do, please come forward. Seeing none, we will now close the public comment period. Is there any further discussion, or would somebody like to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay. City Clerk Duarte, can we take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Ashton?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Saab?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frometa?
Yes.
And Mayor Pacheco?
Yes.
The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we're now on to the next item.
So, Madam Mayor, I need to abstain from item 20. I'm, you know, I'm a residential landlord. I need to abstain from item 20.
Thank you. This item is discussion and direction regarding urgency ordinance establishing a temporary moratorium on evictions of residential tenants impacted by COVID-19 pandemic and providing a repayment period for unpaid rent. City Manager Livas, do we have somebody providing this report?
Councilmember Ashton?
This way, yeah. So again, this kind of is similar to what we talked about with the commercial tenants. This one, City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we don't have to deal with the moratorium part of it because that's already covered by executive order by the governor. Is that correct?
No, the governor's statewide moratorium on evictions of residential renters, that one expired on the 31st, and instead of renewing it or extending it, he issued an order that allows the cities, defers the cities to adopt their own. So he went back to a prior executive order and just kind of left it up to the cities who didn't have their own ordinance to go ahead and adopt their own, or if they already had one, just to simply extend it to July 28th. So that's where we're at. What we do have in place right now is that repayment, that 3-month repayment ordinance that you adopted on April 2nd. That's still in place. So if you want to adopt a moratorium on evictions of residential renters, then I can bring that and merge the repayment into that ordinance. And if you might want to talk about, if you want to do that now, is whether the 3 months should be extended to something different. Then I'll merge those ordinances together and bring that back to you on the 23rd.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll tackle this in 2 sections. So with the moratorium, I would like to kind of do what we just did with the commercial tenant issue and extend that to the end of July. And then with the repayment of the unpaid rents, I know we passed the rental assistance, but I know that that's, as much as I want to say that that's going to help, which it will, but I don't know if it will help everyone. And so with this one, I'd really like to see the 3 months for every month to help with those people that aren't going to be able to either qualify or get, basically, because since it's first come first served, be able to get in time to get help with the rental assistance. So that's kind of where I'm at with with the unpaid rent part of it, the repayment of the unpaid rent.
Okay. Is there any questions, comments? I'm gonna go.
What you're proposing is what you initially proposed with the commercial, is the 30 days in essence, but 3 months to pay that back.
Yes, for every month that this goes on, they get 3 months to pay back.
Yeah, the only concern I see here though is, I mean, what about the landlords? You know, they have their mortgages to pay, and you know, that's just the balance we have to have. I mean, it's worthy of a discussion, right? I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's.
I mean, I get that issue, and this isn't, you know, I know we've been pressed to do like a rent forgiveness. Excuse me, my boy. But this isn't that. This is just terms for repayment. So it's not that they're going to not get paid. It's just that we're giving people more time to actually pay back what they owe.
I'm actually feeling more comfortable with the 2 month for every month also on this one, given the situation that we do have landowners that do have to make their mortgage payments. And I don't know if we have any information as to the number of residents who've had issues with non-payment, not being able to pay their rents. Have we received any calls? Do we have any information?
Actually, surprisingly, we haven't had a lot of calls for that particular issue. So, I don't know, Mr. Schindler in Community Development, have you guys had any calls on that? No. Vanya?
So we have received calls?
For clarification, is that what you're on that particular issue? Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. So I would feel more comfortable with either 8 months or 9 month repayment, because I'm also concerned about the landlords or owners of the properties who have to make their mortgage payments. But I'd like to see what my council colleagues also think.
You know, Madam Mayor and council colleagues, this is such a difficult thing to really come to a decision on, because as Councilmember Rodriguez stated, it is difficult as a government to meddle, to get involved in these things. However, we realize that this year is unlike any other we've seen in our lifetime. And at the same time, we have to balance the needs and the impact of everybody. Looking at Downey in its entirety, and looking at the percentage of individuals that rent versus the individuals that own. I think that's something to think about. Also, as Madam Mayor, you've stated, and Councilmember Saab, we are here to advocate for all, not just for a group. We're here to try to do the best we can possibly to help everyone, and we have to balance that and measure how can we support and in these difficult times ensure that what we are doing provides that assistance during this emergency to the people that need it most, while also I'm concerned that we have to again be reasonable in the terms of repayment, so that in the process of helping some, we don't inadvertently hurt those landlords as well. And so it's difficult. We don't have a magic ball in front of us, and there are still uncertain times. I would like to suggest once again that we review the terms that we just discussed with the commercial tenants, because again, we want to be equitable, and we want to be fair on both ends. If my council colleagues, if your sentiments are different, please, please speak up. This is the time for discussion. And again, I'm troubled because certainly we want to help everybody. And if it were up to me, I could say, give it a year, give it 6 months. But the issue here is, we're dealing with people's livelihoods. And there are many people that rely on the income of their tenants. And so it's so easy to say rent, free rent or mortgage forgiveness for all, but it's, where is that fine line? And I don't want to be long-winded here, but I really struggle, to be honest with you, because I want us to, and I know that is why we're here. We want to make the right decision. But looking at where Downey is in terms of renters and what the right amount is of payback, I would like us to, again, consider a similar term that we just discussed previously. But Councilmember Ashton and Councilmember Saab and Madam Mayor, please, I welcome your thoughts and comments.
So, like I previously mentioned, I feel more comfortable 2 months for every month, which would, in a sense, be still doubling the time for them. We are giving assistance to the neediest of families, and I think this would be a perfect balance. At least that's the way I see it, because we're protecting tenants, and we're also making sure that we protect landlords. And the good thing is we are starting to see more businesses open, so hopefully people can come back to work and get employed. And I'm comfortable with that. I mean, it's like you mentioned, it is really difficult. It's a balancing act. So, like you, I am open to other time periods. If Councilmember Saab and Ashton had something else in mind, I know actually Councilmember Ashton already had 3 months, but I was thinking 2 months for every month. Councilmember Saab?
Yeah, I agree with you, Madam Mayor. I think 2 months is reasonable. I think what I have read, and in my own experience, is that landlords, and I think Councilman Rodriguez alluded to that earlier, landlords need to work it out with the tenants, and they have been, generally speaking. It's not to the landlord's benefit to evict someone. Generally speaking, it's not. And what I have read and spoken to several people is that that tends to be what's been happening, is that the landlords and tenants are, coming to an agreement, and it seems to be commonplace. So I think that the 2 months is reasonable, what you're saying, Madam Mayor, and I think that's I think it seems to be a kind of a good common ground here. Our hearts are all in the right place, and we're all trying to do what we can. And this is, we don't have a template where we can open a book and this is how it worked last time. That's not how it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
One question: the repayment period would begin once after July 28th.
That's
so
correct.
When the ordinance expires, that time period to repay starts.
That's
okay.
correct.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think what makes us comfortable, or at least myself, is because we have that program in place that we just voted on tonight, right? So So I think that, you know, coupled with that, I'm comfortable with this.
Thank you. Before we take a vote on this item, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Members of the public wishing to speak regarding this item may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any speakers on the phone?
Mayor, we don't have any, actually, yes, a caller's coming in.
Okay.
Hello, please state your name and begin speaking.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Catherine. So I'm listening to you guys talking about giving 2 months to pay back rent, right? You guys are not seeing the bigger picture because families, let's say 4 members of the family earning a minimum wage, pretty much they're gonna have to pay those months down and stay without paying bills, food. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. So you guys are not thinking about the tenants. The other thing is that you guys don't know that LA County is going to get about 300,000 families in eviction due to COVID-19. So you guys are saying as well that you guys are want to help the families to pay just 1 month, right? It's only for 300 families. How many families do we have in Downey? And you guys are requesting for calls from the tenants to see if you guys can help to give more time or another help. Well, guess what? I'm the leader of Downey Tenants Union, and I have been receiving the calls. I'm getting all these messages from tenants that are going through a hardship, and they're thinking of actually to move out from Downey because they cannot make it over here. So that's what you guys want, have so many families evicted, and not only that you guys are going to have premises, buildings empty just because you guys don't want to help. LA County is giving 12 months. Well, at least Los Angeles. You guys are giving 2 months. They're not even working. They're just getting their check. If they're getting the check from EDD, if they are. Because there's a lot of families that don't get approved even though they got their hours. They were working less hours. They got their hours cut. So they couldn't apply for EDD. So I'm so concerned about the tenants right now. Not only about the tenants, residents, about the tenants of businesses. They're going to take so much time to make time to pay back. They're going to have to move out. They're going to have to look for another place. I know it's difficult for you guys to make a decision.
Ms. Alvarez, your time is up. Thank you. Hello, please state your name and begin speaking.
Hi, this is Joey from the city of Downey. Obviously, there's a lot of issues and incompetence in the city council right now. But in regards to this issue, this should never be an issue. You guys only have a problem, Ms. Frometa and Pacheco, because you care more about big business than landlords. And how you guys have any reason to be even voting on this, because you guys have multiple conflicts of interest. Pacheco, you need to tell everyone that you are an attorney that has specialized in evicting people, which means you have a lot of relationships with a lot of these landlords. So for us to think that you're going to look for the best interest of the tenants is very hard to comprehend and very hard to believe, especially because we've seen your corruption in other areas of this city. So do your job, guys. Look at the statistics in regards to unemployment in relation to COVID-19. People are losing more jobs today, and the unemployment rate is going up. So it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And obviously, because you guys are more focused on opening businesses, we should expect COVID-19 crisis cases to spur up here in Downey. So do your job. If you're going to be confident enough to open businesses, you should be confident enough to support our tenants here in Downey. This 2-month period thing, you guys should be aiming for complete rent forgiveness. You would have the money, by the way, to do this if you weren't engaged in frivolous lawsuits that were costing us $200,000 and above. And yes, I'm talking about that lawsuit against the basin. So manage your budgets fiscally and properly. Get another manager because obviously he's too pathetic and incompetent to run a budget.
You're off topic.
Community. Protect our tenants.
I'm going to
Do your
remind
job.
you to remain on topic.
No, I'm not off topic, okay? But I'm done anyways. And I'll see you guys next week.
Any other callers?
We have one more call, Mayor. Hello, please state your name and begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm calling in favor of the rent forgiveness for residential renters. Main reason why is because as a city and as city leadership, we have a moral duty to make sure that people stay in their homes, even during extenuating, and this is extenuating circumstances, and they deserve to stay in their homes. And if we do not offer recourse for these people, there's no way that they're going to be able to get into safe, secure housing afterwards. This is a moral judgment and a moral call, and I would really like to see city leadership step up and act and protect the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Mayor, on the calls.
Thank you. City Clerk Duarte, do we have any written public comments on this item to be read into the record?
We do, Mayor. We have a letter from the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. Dear Honorable Mayor Blanca Pacheco and members of the Downey City Council. At tonight's City Council meeting, the City Council will discuss the city's current rent repayment schedule for residential renters unable to pay rent during the moratorium period due to circumstances related to COVID-19. The city's current urgency ordinance provides residential renters with 3 months following the termination of the local emergency to repay deferred rent. As noted in the agenda memo, the City Council will consider maintaining the current ordinance provisions or proposed amendments which would establish a staggered repayment schedule of 6 to 12 months from the termination of the local emergency, depending on the timing of the unpaid rent and errors. As the City Council deliberates the deferred rent repayment options, the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles requests that the City Council consider the concerns and recommendations set forth below. AAGLA has consistently recommended that renters and rental housing providers make best efforts to find workable solutions related to rental payments. Many of AAGLA's members are small owners and retirees who are dependent upon their modest rental income to support themselves, their families, and adequately maintain their property for their residents. Partial rent payments, repayments assist all involved parties. Housing providers receive a portion of the rent needed to cover some of their financial obligations related to essential building maintenance and to help with their own living expenses. At the same time, renters can reduce their overall amount of deferred rent obligations and avoid a large lump sum payment at the end of the repayment period. Accordingly, we urge the Council to maintain the current 3-month deferred rent repayment period, which is reasonable and would not unduly burden rental housing providers who have also experienced adverse financial impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Notwithstanding the foregoing, if the City Council extends the deferred rent payment period beyond 3 months after the lifting of the local emergency, we urge the City Council to limit such extension to no more than 6 months and establish prorated repayments of the unpaid rent to commence at the beginning of the repayment period. Without such parameters, the likelihood that renters may not make any portion of required deferred rent payments until the end of the repayment period increases, as does the possibility that the renter will move out prior to full repayment. Accordingly, if the renter terminates the tenancy at any point within the repayment period, the total amount of deferred rent should become immediately due. Alternatively, rather than make renters responsible for a potential lump sum payment of the deferred unpaid rent due at the end of the repayment period, and that's all the time we have.
Thank you. Members of the audience who are present who wish to address the council regarding this item may now come forward. Seeing none, we will now close the public comment period. Is there any further discussion? Is there a motion?
I make a motion, Madam Mayor.
Is there a second?
So your motion consists of Madam Mayor Pro Tem, what is your motion?
The motion, Councilmember Ashton, is to direct our city attorney to draft the document similar to the commercial tenant we discussed, for that moratorium to expire the end of July 28th, and for every month that is lost due to COVID-19, for the tenants to receive 2 months repayment. So that is a total of 8 months, actually. And if Madam Mayor, or if you want to further explain that.
So yes, just like our Madam Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, the moratorium, her motion is to extend out the moratorium to July 28th with an 8-month repayment period.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and Madam Mayor, begrudgingly, I will second the motion.
Okay. Thank you. Can we, Madam City Clerk, can we take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Ashton?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez abstained from this item. Councilmember Saab?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frometa?
Yes.
And Mayor Pacheco?
Yes.
The motion is approved with Councilmember Rodriguez abstaining.
Thank you. City Manager Olivas, would you like to make any comments regarding Central Basin? I know we've received a lot of calls in regards to that issue.
Yes, you've received some call. Certainly, we've been receiving calls on Central Basin, specifically the Senate Bill 625 that proposes to make changes to the Central Basin Board, essentially put it in receivership. They're in that particular issue because of some long-time issues at Central Basin, certainly. And it's just not Downey saying this. There's 22 cities that are part of a lawsuit against Central Basin. So it's not 1 or 2 cities. It's 22 cities that have been participating in a lawsuit in order to get some corrective actions at Central Basin. So this is sort of a long simmering thing. It's going to wind through the process. We'll see where it goes. Whatever happens with that Senate bill, there's still some litigation moving forward. There's actually 2 lawsuits against Central Basin. One of them is by cities, just cities, and the other, well, actually, there's cities and purveyors. So there are a number of legal actions that are moving through the court system, and we'll see where it all ends up. There was also an indication that the mayor signing a letter of support for the Senate Bill 625 somehow was not valid because it wasn't approved by the city council. What people don't realize is that a lot of cities, what they do is implement a legislative platform each year that you all approve that essentially gives the staff the direction, and you as council members, your mayor, the direction to be able to sign letters of support for things that are on that legislative platform. So there are times when there are critical votes happening in Sacramento. You need a quick response. You can't get a meeting together really quick, and then you need a letter of support. That's why we have a legislative platform that is put together every year, and it's voted upon by the council, which gives the authority to the mayor to execute such a letter. So anyway, I just wanted to dispel that, because there's been some of those folks that's saying, well, the mayor doesn't have the authority to do that, but that's incorrect. So that's all.
Another question, are we trying to privatize any water?
No, and not at all. This has nothing to do with privatizing, water resources. And in fact, I think it's 60 or 68% of the water that is being pumped right now is being done so in Central Basin is done so by public entities. Should the process go, should the the Senate bill move forward, it would go through a LAFCO process, which is a public process that would take public comment, and LAFCO's their only oversight is for public entities, not private entities. So we'll see where it goes. We're still early in that process, and there's two things going on. There's the legislation up in Sacramento, and then there's two lawsuits, and we'll see where it all ends up.
Thank you. So thank you for those who stayed for the rest of our council meeting. It's nice to see you. I'm going to now adjourn the meeting in memory of all the lives affected by COVID-19. Moment of silence. Meeting adjourned.